Universal access to a coronavirus disease vaccine, saying it's the only way to beat the global health crisis. U.S. President Donald Trump casts blame on China over the coronavirus pandemic in an address before the UN, whose chief warns against a new Cold War between the two powers. Astronauts on the International Space Station carried out an avoidance maneuver to ensure they would not be hit by a piece of debris, according to U.S. Space Agency NASA, urging better management of objects in Earth's orbit. And the Iglesia Ni Cristo members took part in the 1 Million Trees Challenge in Winnipeg. President Duterte called for universal access to a coronavirus disease vaccine, saying it is the only way to beat the global health crisis. In his first speech before the 75th UN General Assembly, the president cited the need for rich and poor nations to have access to a vaccine. Take a look.
The invisible enemy that is COVID-19 has brought about an unfamiliar global landscape and unleashed a crisis without precedent. It is the biggest test the world and the United Nations face since World War II. We are at a crossroads. How we address COVID-19 will define our future. COVID-19 knows no border, it knows no nationality, it knows no race, it knows no gender, it knows no age, it knows no creed. We welcome the launch of the UN COVID Response and Recovery Fund. Ensuring universal access to anti-COVID-19 technologies and products is pivotal in the global pandemic recovery. The world is in the race to find safe and effective vaccine. When the world finds that vaccine, access to it must not be denied nor withheld. It should be made available to all rich and poor nations alike as a matter of policy. The Philippines joins our partners in the ASEAN and the non-aligned movement, and in raising our collective voice, the COVID-19 vaccine must be considered a global public good. Let us be clear on this.
Now, the Philippines currently has 291,789 confirmed coronavirus cases with 5,049 deaths, according to a Johns Hopkins University coronavirus tally. President Duterte was the 12th head of state to have his remarks aired at the UN General Assembly high-level debate. This year marks the first time that the global body's high-level general debate and other high-level meetings were done almost completely virtually due to restrictions posed by the health crisis. The United States has officially passed 200,000 deaths in this pandemic. Johns Hopkins University reported the number yesterday, and about two-thirds of those who have died well over 65 years old. But now young people are also driving increased infections in some states. Still, President Trump plays down the crisis. Take a look.
Explains a lot about Trump, and I read Mary Trump's book too.
I think it's a shame. I think if we didn't do it properly and do it right, you'd have 2.5 million deaths. If you take a look at alternatives, you could have 2.5 million deaths or something thereabouts. You could have a number that would be substantially more. With all of that being said, we shouldn't have had anybody.
In Britain, pubs and restaurants restrictions snap back into place as a new wave of COVID-19 infections hits parts of Europe. Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned the House of Commons that the curbs may last 6 months. Joining us live from the United Kingdom, here's Graham Thomas. Graham.
To you.
Hello.
You're absolutely right. In Britain here on Tuesday, restrictions were tightened once again to stem a surge of coronavirus cases, ordering pubs to close early and advising people to go back to working from home to prevent a second national lockdown. Let's listen in.
Not COVID secure. So today I set out a package of tougher measures in England. Early closing for pubs, bars, table service only, closing businesses that are not COVID secure, expanding the use of face coverings, new fines for those that fail to comply, once again asking office workers to work from home if they can, while enforcing the rule of 6 indoors and outdoors. Unless we take action, the risk is that we will have to go for tougher measures later when the deaths have already mounted and we have a huge caseload of infection such as we had in the spring.
So restaurants, bars and pubs were ordered to shut at 10 o'clock at night across England and Scotland, and the new limits were announced on public gatherings such as weddings. Prime Minister Boris Johnson also called a halt on the planned phase of return for fans to live sporting events in England from October the 1st. Despite huge losses and fears, some clubs could go under. To help contain the virus, office workers who can work effectively from home should do so over the winter, the government said, despite fears for the wider economy as many city centres become empty. Johnson has warned the country is tracking European neighbours such as France and Spain with a second wave of infections, making urgent necessary action to prevent tougher rules later. This is the moment we must act, he told Parliament, noting the new measures, which could last up to 6 months, would be bolstered by greater infringement penalties, a boosted police presence, and even a military backup. If all our actions fail to bring the reproduction rate below 1, then we reserve the right to deploy greater firepower with significantly greater restrictions, he added. Johnson hammered home the message in a televised evening address to the nation, calling for a collective effort to get through this winter together. Never in our history has our collective destiny and our collective health depended so completely on our individual behaviour, he said. Back to you, Alma.
All right. So, Graham, how has this new message been received by the people there in the United Kingdom?
It's been mixed, to be honest, Alma, with reports from some sectors of the population saying that it is a conspiracy to allow the United Kingdom to leave the EU with a no deal. To others saying the restrictions don't go far enough. Even the scientists don't agree. Professor John Edmonds, Dean of the Faculty of Epidemiology and Population Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, said it was welcome that the government had done something, but that the curfew on bars and restaurants was likely to have a trivial effect. He said, I think working from home, if you certainly can, is a good idea, but the measures in terms of closing bars an hour early and restaurants at 10 Well, that's fairly trivial in terms of it'll have a small impact on the epidemic. And overall, he didn't think that the measures had gone anywhere near far enough. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Graham, for your updates there in London. Looking forward to more updates as we follow this developing story. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Alma. This is Graham Thomas reporting for EBC in the United Kingdom. We live in interesting times.
To Japan now, where restriction entry will be eased by October, plus heavy rains are expected as Tropical Storm Dolphin heads to Japan. Dennis Liu brings us an update. Dennis?
Hello, Alma. Good evening to you and to all our televiewers. My updates, Alma. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government said that 1,014 tests had been conducted and the number of sickly patients increased to 30 from 27 that was reported earlier. At least 88 new coronavirus cases Tuesday was reported below 100 for a second straight day. This figure brought the total cumulative number of people infected with the virus in the capital, 24,394. On Monday, Japan confirmed 312 new coronavirus cases nationwide, the lowest daily tally in a week. However, infection surge feared in the midst of a 4-day holiday that prompted people to travel to various domestic tourist spots. But reported cases after the long holidays were lower than expected. Meanwhile, Japan's weather agency warned Wednesday that the typhoon expected to bring heavy rain as it heads toward the eastern part of the country could cause landslides and flooding. Typhoon Dolphin, this year's 12th typhoon, is on course to approach eastern and northeastern Japan with heavy rain expected along the Pacific coast on Thursday and Friday, the Japan Meteorological Agency said. In another story, yesterday we happened to pass by the countdown clock for the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games just outside Tokyo Station, showing 305 days before the event. Controversies surfaced recently when a consulting firm for the Tokyo Olympic Bid Committee transferred some 37 million yen or $370,000 to the son of IOC member Lamine Diack and his company before and after Tokyo was picked in September 2013 as the 2020 Olympic host city, documents showed Sunday. Allegation came Tokyo Bid Committee engaged in vote buying. Findings from the review of financial documents and further reporting may help resolve the question of what happened to the money from the consulting firm. Black Tidings Company, the now non-functioning firm based in Singapore, received a total of 230 million yen, $2 million from Tokyo paid into a bank account in the city-state in July and October 2013. The former chief of the Japanese committee confirmed payment but denied allegations. The transfers were discovered in a joint review of leaked reports of suspicious financial activity kept by the U.S. Treasury Department and French authorities. The review was conducted by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists as well as news outlets including the Asahi Shimbun, BuzzFeed News, Radio France, and Kyodo News. The documents included were identified as FinCEN, files submitted by financial institutions to the department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. Documents confirmed that in January of 2014, the Singapore firm wired more than $150,000 in total to the personal account of Papa Masata Diack, 55, whose father, Lamine Diack, was a member of the International Olympic Committee, said to have influence over African votes at the time of the Tokyo bid. From 1999 to 2015, 87-year-old Senegalese businessman held the top post at the Global Athletics governing body. The money included $35,000 paid into Papa Masata's account with a Russian bank in August and November 2013. The firm also made 4 money transfers totaling $217,000 to his company, PMD Consulting Sarl, from November to December 2013. Papa Masata said in an interview with Kyodo that the money he received was related to a sponsorship deal made in China. He said, there is nothing to do with the Tokyo Olympics. Former Japanese Olympic Committee chief Tsunekazu Takeda, who also led the bid committee, denied any knowledge of the money transfers from Black Tidings at the time of the bid. He said, at the time, I did not know anything that happened after making the payment to the consulting firm. Alma?
All right. Let me go back to your earlier report with the lowering of coronavirus cases in Japan. Has Japan made any decisions on easing some restrictions?
Yes, actually, Alma, Japan is considering easing strict border restrictions from October to allow more foreign nationals to enter Japan. Currently bans entry for foreigners from most countries. Tourists would still be banned and only longer-term visas will be approved. Business visitors are already allowed from 7 places, including Thailand, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Local media outlets here also reported that arrivals would be capped at 1,000 per day and the maximum stay would be only 3 months. An immigration agency official should not confirm the reports, saying that only negotiations on business travel resumption were ongoing with several countries. Government spokesman Katsunobu Kato told reporters that ministers will study how to resume accepting new visitors while preventing a resurgence of infections. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis, for all your updates there in Japan. You stay safe, you stay healthy. Thank you.
You too, Alma. Thank you very much. Reporting live from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Lu. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, IATA, the global aviation industry, wants to boost connectivity and bring back more jobs by calling on the development of rapid virus tests on passengers rather than undergo long quarantine protocols. To bring us an update, joining us live from our EBC Switzerland Bureau, here's Mayan Glosser. Mayan.
Yeah, Emma, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
So the global aviation industry, the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, is calling for the development of rapid virus tests for all passengers before departures rather than undergoing long days of quarantine procedures. IATA said rapid testing was the solution needed to relaunch global air connectivity. Most virus testing is being done using molecular tests that can take days to get the results. IATA chief Alexandre Gignac said in a statement, quote, "The key to restoring the freedom of mobility across borders is systematic COVID-19 testing of all travelers before departure." The Gignac urged government and medical testing providers to find a rapid, accurate, affordable, easy-to-operate, and scalable testing solution that will enable the world to safely reconnect and recover. IATA said international travel is currently 92% below 2019 levels. The Geneva-based organization, which represents some 219 airlines comprising 82% of global air traffic, warned that at least 65.5 million jobs depends on the airline industry. Meanwhile, Alma, although border controls have been loosened here in Switzerland, the pre-COVID world has not really returned. Only citizens, residents, and cross-border workers were allowed to cross into Switzerland during the pandemic. The number of new positive cases has increased in recent weeks, with the average case count almost at 60 per 100,000 residents over the past 2 weeks. Currently, Switzerland has 50,664 confirmed cases and with 2,054 deaths, according to a Johns Hopkins University tally. Travel is possible between Switzerland and the European Union, EFTA countries, and the UK. Travelers from Switzerland to the UK must go into quarantine for 14 days. Those traveling from most non-Schengen countries, including the US, can enter Switzerland only in exceptional cases. Citizens and residents of Switzerland may always enter. Those who come to Switzerland from high-risk countries and regions must undergo a 10-day quarantine or face a fine. Face masks are mandatory on Swiss public transport, air flight, and at Basel and Geneva airports. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Man, for your updates there in Switzerland. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Alma. I'm Man Gauzer reporting from Geneva, Switzerland, and we live in interesting times.
Eagle News, we'll be right back.
The New Era University, in its 45th year of excellence, discipline, and service to humanity, will offer online education all levels beginning this first semester academic year 2020 to 2021 through the NEU Virtual Learning Environment, or NEU VLE. New Era University offers a complete basic education cycle from kindergarten up to senior high school, offering all strands. NEU has 18 colleges, and 2 graduate schools. It also offers ALS and ETF. Best of all, NEU has the most affordable tuition fees among private universities in the Philippines. NEU is at Quezon City, the city of San Fernando, Pampanga, General Santos City, South Cotabato, Lipa City, Batangas, and Pinugay, Baras, Rizal. New Era University is under the stewardship of Dr. Dilo L. Rosas. What are you waiting for? Be part of the new normal. Enroll now. Classes start on October 5, 2020.
Europe has recorded more than 5 million coronavirus infections since the first cases appeared in China in December. That is according to a report by AFP from official sources on Wednesday at 1100 GMT. A total of 5,421 cases have now been registered, of which more than half were in Russia, which is 1,122,000 infections, 19,799 deaths, followed by Spain, France, and the United Kingdom. Europe has recorded 227,130 deaths. More than 380,000 new cases have been reported in the past week, the highest number in the region since the start of the pandemic. The rise in infections can be partly explained by the sharp increase in testing in countries including France, where more than 1 million tests are now carried out every week. Despite the increase, many less serious or asymptomatic cases probably remain undetected. And we'll return to the coronavirus pandemic later in the program. For the first time, the United Nations General Assembly met virtually due to the COVID-19 as it marked its 75th anniversary. U.S. President Donald Trump used a video address to the annual UN General Assembly to say that the 200,000 deaths milestone of the U.S. was a shame and again deflected blame onto China. Take a look.
It is my profound honor to address the United Nations. We have waged a fierce battle against the invisible enemy, the China virus, which has claimed countless lives in 188 countries. General Assembly, 75 years after, we will distribute a vaccine. We will defeat the virus. We will end the pandemic. And we will enter a new era of unprecedented prosperity, cooperation, and peace. As we pursue this bright future, we must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China, accountable for their actions. In addition, every year, China's carbon emissions are nearly twice what the U.S. has, and it's rising fast. By contrast, after I withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord, last year America reduced its carbon emissions by more than any country in the agreement. Those who attack America's exceptional environmental record while ignoring China's rampant pollution are not interested in the environment. They only want to punish America, and I will not stand for it. General Assembly, 75 years after, these groundbreaking peace deals are the dawn of the new Middle East. By taking a different approach, we have...
During his UN General Assembly speech, Chinese President Xi Jinping called on nations to avoid the trap of a clash of civilizations during the pandemic. He said any attempt of politicizing the issue or stigmatization of the pandemic must be rejected. Take a look.
面对疫情，我们要加强团结，同舟共济。要秉持科学精神，充分发挥世界卫生组织关键领导作用，推进国际联防联控，坚决打赢全球疫情阻击战，反对政治化、污名化。中国已经有多支疫苗进入3期临床试验，研发完成并投入使用后，将作为全球公共产品，优先向发展中国家提供。我们要树立你中有我，我中有你的命运共同体意识，跳出小圈子和零和博弈思维，树立大家庭和合作共赢理念，摒弃意识形态争论，跨越文明冲突陷阱，相互尊重各国自主选择的发展道路和模式，让世界多样性成为人类社会进步的不竭动力，人类文明多彩多姿的天然形态。
Meanwhile, China said the U.S. should be held accountable for losing so many lives to the pandemic. In a sharp rebuttal after President Trump delivered a harsh attack on Beijing in a speech to the UN General Assembly. Again, let's listen in.
If we do have to hold anyone accountable, it should be the United States held accountable for losing so many lives and with their irresponsible behaviors. I have to make it very clear that some U.S. politicians' attempt of blame shifting and scapegoating will not get the time they have lost and will not help them solve their own problems. They may wish to be great, but to be great, you have to behave like a leader. The United States should be the last one to talk about climate change because of their behavior. They are the one who has not ratified the Kyoto Protocol. They are the one who has pulled out the Paris Agreement. They are the one who are disassociating itself from the international efforts in climate change.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the world to prevent a new Cold War between the United States and China and halt conflict so it can focus on solving the COVID-19 pandemic.
The world needs a global ceasefire to stop all hot conflicts. But at the same time, we must do everything to avoid a new Cold War. we are moving in a very dangerous direction. Our world cannot afford a future where the two largest economies split the globe in a great fracture, each with its own trade and financial rules and internet and artificial intelligence capacities.
Meanwhile, President Duterte affirmed the Permanent Court of Arbitration's ruling in favor of the Philippines' arbitration case against China's expansive maritime claims in the South China Sea before the UN General Assembly. In his pre-recorded speech delivered from Malacanang, the President, during the 75th session of the General Assembly in New York, encouraged fellow UN member states to remain mindful of their obligations and commitment to the Charter of the UN and as amplified by the 1982 Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes. Take a look.
We must remain mindful of our obligation and commitment to the Charter of the United Nations, and as amplified by the 1982 Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes, the Philippines affirms that commitment in the South China Sea in accordance with UNCLOS and the 2016 Arbitral Award. The award is now part of international law, beyond compromise and beyond the reach of passing governments to dilute, diminish, or abandon. We firmly reject attempts to undermine it. We welcome the increasing number of states that have come in support of the award and what it stands for: the triumph of reason over rashness, of law over disorder, of amity over ambition. This, as it should, is the majesty of the law.
The U.S. Senate Republican majority has moved a big step closer to fulfilling the vacancy in the U.S. Supreme Court. Republican Senator Mitt Romney said he will not oppose a vote on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, solidifying the party's majority to move forward with the controversial pre-election process. Take a look.
You know, I think at this stage it's appropriate to look at the Constitution and to look at the precedent which has existed since the beginning of our country's history. And in a circumstance where a nominee of a president is from a different party than the Senate, then more often than not, the Senate does not confirm. So the Garland decision was consistent with that. On the other hand, when there's a nominee of a party that is in the same party as the Senate, then typically they do confirm. So the Garland decision was consistent with that, and the decision to proceed now with the President Trump's nominee is also consistent with history. I came down on the side of the Constitution and precedent as I've studied it, and make the decision on that basis.
The next step will be for Chairman Graham to lay out the way to handle this in committee. And when the nomination comes out of committee, then I'll decide when and how to proceed.
Early polls show that a majority of Americans disagree with your approach. They want you to wait. Does that give you pause?
Well, as all of us have pointed out, we have an obligation under the Constitution, should we choose to take advantage of it, with a president of the same party as the Senate, to advance the nomination. And we will certainly do that this year. This Senate is in current Senate elected the last time in 2018. Will be here till the end of the year, and the president will be here till January 20th.
Democrats argue that any Senate vote should be delayed until after the election has made clear who will lead the country from 2021. They cite the example of 2016 when, under then Democratic President Barack Obama, his nominee to replace Antonin Scalia months before the election did not even get a hearing in the Republican-controlled Senate.
If Leader McConnell presses...
Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized Senate Republicans and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for their push to fill the vacant Supreme Court seat before November's election.
Republican Majority Leader McConnell likes to say he's a Senate institutionalist. Nothing could be further from the truth. Leader McConnell's actions may now very well destroy the institution of the Senate. If Leader McConnell presses forward, the Republican majority will have stolen 2 Supreme Court seats, 4 years apart, using completely contradictory rationales. Voting rights and the right of every American citizen to have a voice in our democracy hangs in the balance. And so much more. And on every one of these issues, what the Republicans have done is they have pulled the federal judiciary to their far-right side. Now they want to tilt the Supreme Court even further away so it doesn't reflect the values of the majority of Americans. It reflects the values of an extreme right-wing majority.
Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Sila ang mga kinikilalang bayaning may mahalagang papel para makamit ang kalayaan at pagbabago sa Pilipinas. Pero sa panahong ito, may mga bagong bayaning nakikipaglaban sa sakit na lumaganap sa buong daigdig, ang COVID-19. Ang ating mga frontliner, gaya ng healthcare workers, mga doktor, nurses, medical technologists, at iba pang health professionals, mga pulis, sundalo, security guards, mga tauhan na nangangalaga sa seguridad at mahahalagang pangangailangan ng bawat komunidad. Ang mga bagong bayani, ating pasalamatan. Kilalanin ang kanilang sakripisyo at serbisyo para sa lahat.
Hello, my name is Robin, and I'm 5 years old. My mom and dad said many people are getting sick. That is why we have to stay at home. That is why I cannot go to school. I cannot play outside, and I cannot even visit my friends. We can only go outside if we visit the doctor, or if we need to buy some food. And when we get home, we have to wash our hands. While I'm at home, I do my homework, clean up my toys, help cooking our food, and help my parents with their work. Please stay home so we can all play together again. Bye!
Para sa akin, ang magaling na singer ay walang inaatrasan kahit ano paman. Mapa one-on-one pa yan sa kantahan. Ako po si Marcos Ison, nagbabalik bilang isa sa panel of judges this season. Magkita-kita po tayo sa pinakabago at pinakamalaking talent competition on Philippine TV. Tagi sa Nanggaling Part 2, dito lang sa Net 25.
Welcome back. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn in for a 6th term at a secret ceremony held with no prior announcement, according to the Belta State News Agency. Lukashenko has faced massive demonstrations against his rule in Minsk and other cities since claiming victory in disputed elections on August 9 and has made only rare appearances in public view. Earlier, independent news agencies reported that streets were closed as Lukashenko's motorcade raced through the capital Minsk, prompting speculation that the inauguration was due to take place, while there was no official confirmation. Lukashenko's official website didn't make any announcement, and the ceremony was not shown live on state television, apparently to avoid protesters gathering. The 66-year-old leader, in power since 1994, viewed one protest rally from his helicopter, describing the demonstrators as rats, and later disembarked in a bulletproof vest carrying a Kalashnikov. Now he has sought backing from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has promised him law enforcement backup if needed, as well as a $1.5 billion loan. His main opposition rival, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, claimed she won the election but has taken shelter in Lithuania. The Berlin medical facility treating Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who the West believes was poisoned with Novichok, a nerve agent, has been discharged from hospital after just over a month. The 44-year-old Kremlin critic and anti-corruption campaigner fell ill after boarding a plane in Siberia last month and was hospitalized there before being flown to Berlin. He spent 32 days in the Berlin hospital, including 24 days in intensive care before his release. Germany has said toxicology tests provide unequivocal proof that he had been poisoned by the Soviet-era military-grade nerve agent, which was also used in a separate poisoning in 2018 on ex-double agent Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, Britain. France and Sweden have since said tests they ran independently corroborate with Germany's conclusions. But the Russian doctors who first treated Navalny said their tests didn't find any toxic substances and that the Kremlin has rejected international calls for an investigation. In other news, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, outlined a plan to better share responsibility for settling refugees and sending rejected asylum seekers home in an effort to rally skeptical member states.
Migration is complex. The old system to deal with it in Europe no longer works. The Commission's package on migration and asylum, which we present today, offers a fresh start. It is not a question whether member states should support with solidarity and contributions, but how they should support. Moria is a stark reminder. We need to find sustainable solutions on migration, and we all have to step up.
The proposal follows a devastating fire earlier this month at an overcrowded camp for migrants and asylum seekers on the Greek island of Lesbos that left thousands homeless and put EU migration policy back in the spotlight. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said last week that the new proposals would include plans to strengthen border security and return failed asylum seekers, which Kurz and allies are in favor of, while also including a new strong solidarity mechanism. At least 380 whales have died in a mass stranding in southern Australia, according to officials, with rescuers managing to free just a few dozen survivors. Nearly the entire pod of 460 long-finned pilot whales stuck in Macquarie Harbour on the rugged and sparsely populated west coast of Tasmania has now perished.
The aerial recon that we put up this morning to do the infrared survey, we sent them further into the harbour and they have detected around about another 200 in a couple of bays, probably 7 to 10 kilometres away from the stranding that we've been working on. From the air, most appear to be dead, but as we speak, we've got a boat heading over to do an assessment from the water. Another is that in that part of the harbour, the water is a very dark tannin colour, so we think potentially they stranded, washed back into the water, and then have been washed back into the bay, so that made it more difficult to detect them early. We're certainly going to do a more extensive search. Our thoughts are that we probably won't find any more, but I think in terms of how finding that earlier may have changed what we did, I don't think it would have. I think our focus would still have been on that pod close to the boat ramp, closer to the heads.
The first of the giant mammals were found on Monday, sparking a major effort to free them from a sandbar only accessible by boat. The whales have been found stranded up to 10 kilometers apart, and officials have now expanded their search area to see if more of the mammals are stuck nearby. Astronauts on the International Space Station carried out an avoidance maneuver to ensure they would not be hit by a piece of debris, according to NASA, urging better management of objects in Earth's orbit. Russian and U.S. flight controllers worked together during a 2.5-minute operation to adjust the station's orbit and move further away, avoiding collision. NASA said the debris passed within about 1.4 kilometers of the ISS. The 3 crew members, 2 Russians and an American, relocated to be near their Soyuz spacecraft as the maneuver began so they could evacuate if necessary, NASA said, adding that the precaution was taken out of an abundance of caution. The astronauts were able to return to their normal activities after the procedure, according to NASA. The threatening scrap was actually a piece of a 2018 Japanese rocket. Astronomer Jonathan McDowell said on Twitter, the rocket broke into 77 different pieces last year. And here's a video illustrating the growing concern over space debris. Take a look. Millions of pieces of man-made debris are currently orbiting the Earth, and this huge cloud of space junk is suspended between 800 and 2,000 kilometers above us. Since space exploration began in 1957, fragments from more than 5,000 space launches and 290 orbital explosions have been accumulating. Old rockets, satellites, tools lost by astronauts, and even flecks of paint pose a serious threat to future space exploration, particularly manned flights and stations. Sensors carried on space vehicles only tend to detect micro debris, but damage from a collision can be serious due to the very fast orbital speed of this debris, traveling at some 28,000 kilometers an hour. The International Space Station, for example, has had to perform avoidance maneuvers more than a dozen times. There's also the risk of debris slamming into the hundreds of Earth observation and telecommunication satellites which orbit the Earth. Billions of dollars worth of weather monitoring equipment, global navigation, and communication system are at risk. The big fear is of a collision occurring and triggering a chain reaction known as the Kessler syndrome. Thousands of pieces of debris measuring more than 10 centimeters and sometimes as big as a bus are currently being tracked and followed from Earth by radars and telescopes. Space agencies have guidelines in place on how to deal with potential collision threats, but as yet, no viable method exists for debris removal. The €4 billion EU-funded Stardust project involving NASA and universities around the world aims to tackle the threat of both space junk and asteroids by developing strategies to deflect or remove space debris. And NASA on Monday revealed its latest plan to return astronauts to the moon in 2024 and estimated the cost of meeting that deadline at $28 billion, $16 billion of which would be spent on the lunar landing module. Congress, which faces elections on November 3, will have to sign off on the financing for a project that has been set by President Trump as a top priority. The $28 billion would cover the budgetary years of 2021 to 2025. And finally, in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo members took part in the 1 Million Trees Challenge in Winnipeg. Kathleen May Pangan has this report.
They're always ready to help and are quick in responding to the needs of our fellow men and the community. They're consistent in holding 80 humanity outreach programs in different places of the world. Who are these people who are always ready to help the needs of the community and work hand in hand with the leaders of the community? They are the members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, Church of Christ, an international church that is now established in 158 countries all over the world. Who is the man who inspired them to do the Aid to Humanity outreach program through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation that even had caught the attention of the political leaders in the community? Their dynamic leader, Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. This time, the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ members are taking part in doing something valuable for our environment's welfare for future generations.
This is an event in support of the 1 Million Tree Challenge, which was initiated last September by the Mayor of Winnipeg, Brian Bowman. This is our very first volunteer event related to that challenge. I was contacted by the Church of Christ last fall with the offer of having hundreds of volunteers able to help us with this 1 Million Tree Challenge. We had to wait a little while to initiate the event, but I contacted a member of the church, and he was really easily able to find all these volunteers on a pretty short notice. So we would not be able to do this type of activity without the support of community members, members of the Church of Christ. So we're very appreciative. Everyone's spirit, everyone's commitment, friendliness has been amazing. We've only known each other a very short period of time, but I know we're going to have a really great partnership in the future. I guess I would say thank you for building such a great community that comes together and supports the community at large. Just an amazing thing.
They're participating in the 1 Million Trees Challenge of Winnipeg's Mayor Brian Bowman.
Well, it's always nice to be able to come out and support a wonderful activity today. So I appreciate being asked to come out. What I have found is that in many different circumstances, I will often attend something related to Church of Christ or even other church or other organizations. And often what you will get is, people helping other people. Maybe it's to fight poverty or to work on housing and all sorts of things. Today is really special because Church of Christ has actually made a commitment to our environment. Our kids and others, we know how important our environment is, and that's really what today's all about. We're planting trees. So members of the Church of Christ have been out for the last couple of days. I think they've planted over 250 trees in a park, and that's really thinking into the future. It is about protecting our environment. The more trees we have, the better it is. The Prime Minister of Canada said he wants to see 2 billion trees planted. Well, Church of Christ is kind of like showing the way. Not only can it be an individual, but it can also be church families and so many other organizations. So at this point, I think it's great just to recognize how Church of Christ has really stepped up once again on a very important social issue. And this is all about the earth. There is only one earth. And so it's planting trees to make things better for not only today's generation, but future generations.
They are led by their district minister, Brother Sidney Santos. Resident ministers, ministerial workers, officers, and the members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ are gathered while following the COVID-19 restrictions to respond to the call of Mayor Brian Bowman to plant hundreds of trees here at Woodsworth Park in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Ka Eduardo po, once again, we would like to thank you so much for this blessing in our district to help the community and also to help the future, not only of the church members, but also in this province po. We were able to plant many trees with your approval and always your guidance po. And we know that even though the future is uncertain, we have done our part once again as members of the Church of Christ to ensure that the children and those that will follow afterwards will always have something that they will be able to use and a legacy of the Church of Christ po in our community. Thank you once again po, Ka Eduardo. We love you so much po, and we will continue to follow your guidance and your love for all of us and for the entire community here in Manitoba po. Thank you again po.
They are led by their district minister, Brother Sidney Santos. Resident ministers, ministerial workers, Officers and members of the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ are gathered while following the COVID-19 restrictions to respond to the call of Mayor Brian Bowman to plant hundreds of trees here at Woodsworth Park in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada today, September 19, 2020. Reporting for Eagle News from Manitoba, Canada, I am Kathleen May Pangan. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Kath. And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.